spread the word. Eating pepperoni rolls and listening to John Denver must be the cure. Since we're the only ones without it.
Don't brag.
No, I honestly just think it's because, our being behind the times, to be quite blunt about it, we have no international airports really, and that's a big difference. And most of us kind of stay put for most of the time and what have you, and we don't have as many foreigners in and out of our state.
Nobody wants to come here.
Nobody wants to come here. Yeah, yeah, like the Garth Brooks song, nobody gets off in this town. We got one stoplight and it's always green. Anyway, it is interesting times. Wherever you think about the situation or whatever, I believe it's going to be one of those things 20 years from now, if the world stands and we're all still alive, we're going to look back and say, you remember? Because right now everybody's remembering, in 93, the great snowfall in the third week of March in 93. Everybody remembers 9/11. Everybody remembers Challenger. I think we're going to probably look back and remember the year that everything canceled, all sports and whatever. Hopefully it will end up being not as bad as some people anticipate. I certainly hope everybody's glad to be wrong if it's not bad. But yet there are going to definitely be many people affected by this. All right. Couple things real fast. Yes, there are going to be some things different today about communion and contribution. Those will be dealt with next hour. But yes, there are things that are addressed, and you'll be told about that as it comes about. One of the things with the contribution is the mailbox in the foyer is actually the contribution box for today. We will not pass the tray for contribution. You could do it on the way in, but obviously many of you didn't know that. You can do it on the way out. That's actually a scriptural thing because Jesus was sitting next to the contribution box or nearby when the widow put her 2 mites in. That's actually an approved example in Scripture. Passing a tray is not actually there. So, nothing wrong with that at all by any means. All right. So, we're going to be in Proverbs 7 and 8, those 2 chapters. I've asked Tim to lead us in prayer before we get started. So, if he'll do that, certainly we'll get started in our class in just a moment.
It's all about prayer. Dear God, once again we come to you in prayer this morning. We're so thankful for this morning and this first day of the week. And dear God, we're thankful that we can come together and to be together and to fellowship with one another and to study your word together. Dear God, we're so thankful that we have this time in our lives today to be able to strengthen ourselves spiritually and in our faith and our love to you and for each other. We thank you so much for your holy and divine word as we open it up and look into it and apply it to our lives. Dear God, we pray that we do this morning in a way that's pleasing to you. We're thankful for all the classes and the teachers and even the students that we all are. We're thankful for just this moment in life as we pause to appreciate what all you've given to us, and especially your word and especially Jesus Christ. Dear God, we pray for those that are affected by the virus going around. Dear God, we pray that lives will be touched by you, and dear God, we pray that these ones that have suffered some loss, we pray, dear God, that you be with them and comfort them. And dear God, we do pray that everything that we do and alter today is within the boundaries of your holy and divine word. And dear God, we just pray that you be with us and keep us safe and keep us healthy. And please make us wise. And dear God, we pray that all the decisions that we make will be pleasing to you and in harmony with your word. We ask you, dear God, to please forgive us for our sins and where we fall short in thy name. Dear God, it's all in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. A couple things I want to mention before we get started in the class. I made an advertisement on Facebook this morning So we may have more people watching online than normal. Plus, I know some of our members have indicated to me that they were staying home and going to be at home and watching that way. For those that are at home, if you have my cell phone number, by all means, and you've got a comment pertinent to the class, text me if you have my cell phone number to do that. We can work something out later otherwise, but don't write a book. I don't have time to read a book while I'm teaching class, but if you send a short question or comment, I'll treat it just like a comment or question from the floor. Also, a manner of procedure. I don't know how closely people pay attention, but anytime someone from the floor makes a comment, I summarize what they always say. I don't know if you ever get that. That's different than what a lot of teachers do that. I learned that a while ago with the last church I was at because our auditorium is so big, and then also here because people can't hear, and definitely people online can't hear. So I will summarize at least what everybody says so that you get it through the microphone and so that it can be heard. And so anyway, please, by all means, if you are able to make a comment or question, by all means do that. And for people that are watching that have known me a while, I have the same cell phone number I had the whole time I was in South Carolina. So if you've got my number from the last about 11 years, you've got my right number. Anyway, okay. Our study this morning is in Proverbs chapter 7, also Proverbs chapter 8. We're going through the book of Proverbs 2 chapters a week, condensing it so that we do an overview. Why are we doing an overview? Largely because much of the book is repetitive, and being repetitive, it will get very tedious if we get bogged down on too many things. Also, I want to mostly give a survey, an overview of the text. Last week we looked at obviously chapters 5 and 6, and looking at chapters 5 and 6, they talked about one overall subject. What was the overall subject of last week? Chapters 5 and 6. The biggest thing that was discussed. Avoiding adultery, in particular the adulterous woman. And of course, that's not blaming women more for adultery or anything like that, but the book is written from the perspective of a father to a son, and so given that perspective, he's using that to emphasize to his son to avoid the adulterous woman. And so he talks about that. Basically a chapter and a half. There is a portion of chapter 6, that deals with the 7 things that God hates, that are the 6 things God hates, 7 that are abomination to him. But outside of that, it is 2 chapters primarily warnings and things said against the adulterous woman and avoiding her. Chapter 7 carries that very same theme, does the same thing. And so, looking at chapter 7, we can cover the same kind of material. Starting in verse 1, we'll read the first 5 verses together. I don't know whether you grabbed an outline or not on the table and the podium in the back, but there is an outline for chapters 7 and 8 on the podium in the back. Verse 1, My son, keep my words and treasure up my commandments with you. Keep my commandments and live. Keep my teaching as the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call insight your intimate friend, to keep you from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words. He says to his son to treasure and to keep the words of wisdom that he gives. And he says to him, you are to call wisdom your sister. And you're to call insight your intimate friend. And so that you can stay away from the forbidden woman. The important part of this is that that in doing so, it will protect you from the sin that you could find yourself in. And so, you arm yourself, you protect yourself, you treasure the things of wisdom and insight in order to keep you away from what you might do. And that very much is the case. It's a very important thing. Solomon's father, David, wrote in Psalm 119, I think it's verse 16, "Thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against you." And so he wrote that, put that there so that he could stay away from the sin that would be there. He says, write that on the tablet of your heart. Any questions or comments through the first 5 verses? Okay, verse 6. "For at the window of my house I have looked out through the lattice, and I have seen among the simple, I have perceived among the youth a young man lacking sense, passing along the street near the corner, taking the road to her house, in the twilight in the evening, at the time of night in darkness." Solomon notices a young man who's kind of slipping through the shadows, going down the street, coming by the way to where he is headed. And in so doing, he's kind of slipping along, sneaking along. He calls him from the beginning, among the simple, one of the youths, and somebody lacking sense. And so, he's coming along doing this. Verse 10, "And behold, a woman meets him, dressed as a prostitute, wily of heart. She is loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay at home. Now in the street, now in the market, and at every corner she lies in wait. She seizes him and kisses him, and with bold face she says to him, I have offered sacrifices, and today I paid my vows. So now I have come out to meet you, to seek you eagerly, and I have found you. I have spread my couch with coverings, colored linens from Egyptian linen. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh and aloes and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love till morning. Let us delight ourselves with love." He's slipping down the streets, coming through the shadows, kind of sneaking along. And then she comes out in the middle of the street and says, "Oh, glad to see you!" Dressed as a prostitute. She is bold, brass, loud. And here he has come out in, kind of slipping along, sneaking along. Why would you do that? Well, you don't want anybody to know what you're doing. You don't want anybody to know what you're up to. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? But not her. She's loud and proud. Use a pun. She's loud and proud of who she is. She says, "Oh, I've been waiting on you. I've got the bed all ready. I've got all these things laid out there." Hope he's not allergic to cinnamon. I've got myrrh and aloes and cinnamon. Maybe that would be good if he was allergic to cinnamon. I don't know. But anyway, got all these things set up. And I've got it all ready. So what is there on her part? That would be what would be called premeditated. Wouldn't you say? She has been preparing for this. You know what that also means? She's been having a conversation with him, knowing about what he is doing, because he's coming. She's preparing in anticipation. And she is ready for this. So she is premeditated about her actions. There's no illusions as to what she wants. I think that would suffice, wouldn't it? There's no question. He doesn't have to think, okay, what is she really trying to say? That's not it at all. After this, she says in verse 19, "For my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He took a bag of money with him. At full moon he will come home." There again, helps give you no illusion as to who she is and what she's up to. My husband is on a long journey. He took plenty of money. He has intentions of being gone for quite a while. It's going to be a good while before he comes back. And so, to also remind that this is a married woman. It would be bad enough if she were not, but it makes it even more wrong that she is. And so, no illusions. This is a married woman. Her husband's out of town, and she is prepared. She's got everything together. And here this youth has come in, and there's no question, there's no illusion, there's not even any innuendo. This is clear. This is what's going on. But she still uses, in verse 21, with much seductive speech. She persuades him. With her smooth talk, she compels him. So she is completely out there. So what do we get out of this? Solomon is saying this to his son. What can be accomplished by this? By him approaching what he's seen and telling this story.
I think this could happen in lots of different forms, not just with the prostitute. Satan has many witty inventions that can lure us into all different types of sin.
Right.
So beware.
That's exactly right, Tim. Yeah, Satan does have all kinds of ways to tempt us. In fact, I think of James chapter 1, which says that we are drawn away by our own lusts, our own desires. And then, when that happens, we're tempted. And then when we're tempted, it gives birth to sin. And sin brings about death. And it fits with anything that we might be tempted with. That it confronts us. And what do we do about it? Well, what are some things he could have done differently?
Walked away when he saw her.
Okay, he could have walked away when he saw her. Could have said no. But even beyond that,
I think the thought you have to prepare, as Tim talked about, like, goes right along with it. You said something last week that stuck in your mind. Brody and I were talking about something. You said something about talking about people. You have to make that choice before you're in that situation.
oh yes.
It requires premeditation on our part. We can't just haphazardly live our lives. We have to be. You can still be presented with this situation, but you have to think. What are the consequences?
Right. We've got to think on that decision, and as Jim's pointing out, that we must be aware on the front end, along with something that said last week, and to repeat it, you don't make a decision to stay a virgin in the back seat of a car on a lonely road with somebody you're really attracted to. Okay? What you don't do is don't put yourself in that spot. Don't go to a lonely road with someone you're attracted to that's not your spouse. Don't go there. If you are dating somebody, well, then you go to public places. You kind of group date with friends. You don't put yourself in situations that are tempting. Because, hey, the strongest people are going to cave in many instances in that situation. And let's face it, given the hormones that are going on in your body, the changes that are going on in your body, those that are, in the 15 to 25-year-old age have the least amount of self-control. Your brains aren't fully developed. The hormones are kicking in. You don't know how to deal with all those things, and it's difficult. It exponentially makes it harder. And so that's the worst time to put yourself in a situation like that. So whatever you can do to prevent yourself, this text kind of shows it. What if he were not sneaking down the alleys and in the shadows and not going? He knew where her house was. Apparently, this was not the first time they had interacted. Also, he's a young man. He knows what part of town to go to and what not to. You just don't go to that part of town. You don't go by that house. One way to avoid it is never go to that area. Stay away from there. Did you have something, Jim, you want to say?
Most of the time, sin isn't ugly and scary. It's enticing and beautiful and inviting. And don't be naive to think,
Right.
I'm strong enough to resist that temptation.
Absolutely.
Satan-
There is pleasure in sin. If it was always painful and bad, nobody would do it. But the pleasure is momentary. It's fleeting. It's not, the consequences are terrible, but the act itself, yeah, there's pleasure there, and it entices us into that. Tim?
Yes, Satan will always find a way to help us get into sin.
Absolutely.
He'll always find a way to help us to realize there's nothing wrong with this.
Yeah.
To see this, to make it right. And that's when you have to stop and pause and think of all the circumstances and the moment, and like she said, the consequences.
Right.
We have to outsmart Satan.
Right.
And if you have God on your side, that's not hard to do. But the problem is
Yeah.
the weakness, the flesh.
It's put in front of us. We live in such a we're so distracted by the little things. I reference Facebook because I literally look at the distraction of how that could cause that in a man or a woman. In the household, you got somebody who they become addicted to this stuff. They don't even know how many hours they spend on it. Well, the guy gets lonely. He's thinking about things, from a physical standpoint. His wife's, in there, chatting with her 56 friends that she's communicating with at that point in time. And then we look at that, how that's the devil working. We have to be, it starts with the foundation of what we have in our household. And you look at
Right.
that from the woman, from this prostitute standpoint. My husband's gone. She premeditated this too. She's not.
Yeah.
It's not that type of household. She may have a good husband. She may have a quality husband. And she's premeditating this too. So.
And she may have a husband that's real lax
It's
too.
easy connected to
Yeah.
how things happen in the world today. We were in a situation, say within this county with someone we knew, and a Facebook post came out, and that person said, I'm doing what's best for me. And it
Right.
involved this type of situation. Unfortunately, that's where we live.
Yeah, we've got to be
It
so.
happened then, it happened right then now. They
We-
do Bible as well.
We've got to be so careful of what we do, and yes, definitely careful, and we have, it happens, that people can get themselves in trouble online, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those different things. There is potential danger there in doing that, so we've got to be very careful to use those things in correct moderation in order to keep ourselves away from that. And so, yeah, there's premeditation on this. There's, all these things going on. But if this young man had not gone that way and not interacted with this lady, it would have never happened. Lady's probably a loose term on that regard, but this woman, certainly it would stay away from that. So that's, you can't change what the other person does. You can't change them, but you have full choice over what you do. And so he had full choice over what he did. And so it was important for that. Verse 22. All at once he follows her, as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as a stag is caught fast, till an arrow pierces its liver. A bird rushes into a snare. He does not know that it will cost him his life. He uses examples of an ox, a stag, and a bird, all of which are caught, all of which are killed, and all of which don't know it's going to happen up until the end. I've not done it, but I've seen videos of it. Maybe some of you guys that hunt do. Sometimes people will use a decoy to deer hunt with. And especially works during the rut, during the mating season. And you put out there a doe decoy during the rut, or maybe if it's the pre-rut, you might put one with antlers out there to get them to fight to run off a rival. You know one thing you wouldn't put out there is a coyote decoy or a silhouette of a black bear. You know why? Because you're not going to bring any deer to the silhouette of a coyote or a black bear. Why? Because that's danger. That's not the way to draw in a deer. Well, that's really what's going on here. You see, he doesn't know it, but he's falling for this. That decoy is out there. And she is attracting him, bringing him in, but he's coming in just like that big buck coming in. He doesn't know. He's done. He's toast. And he's just like an ox coming to the slaughter, just like a stag that's caught, just like a bird that's caught. And so comes in, sees this decoy because she's not real love. She's not what is right. We talked last week about what Solomon said, to love and to cherish the wife of your youth. That's the right place for these thoughts. That's the right place for these feelings. That's the right outlet for sexual activity, not this adulteress. And so with that, here he is coming in. He's like an ox that's going off to the slaughterhouse. And so he's being attracted in. If sin showed what it really is, nobody would take that. Nobody would know. Nobody would follow that if they saw the damage that is caused as the result of the sin. Any questions through verse 23? Or comments?
Yeah, in what ways would it cost him his life?
What ways would it cost him his life? Well, not only physically, it's spiritual death that's more important, that's being dealt with here. Losing your life, it's a dangerous game he's playing, Under the old law, under the old covenant, adultery was a punishable by death crime. So, that could be. And after all, she's out there loud and proud in front of the house telling, what's going on. And so, anybody paying attention, and by the way, who's writing this? The king of the land. Now, he does not exercise such a thing that we know of. So he's extending a little grace, maybe a little mercy in that. But let's face it, doing this in full view of the king of the land, someone that is there to enforce the laws and rules. So that's one way. Also, HIV might be more of a modern disease, but there have been STDs since the beginning of time. And so, there are diseases that can come about as well. There's a whole host of things, not to mention the worst of all, and that's spiritual death.
You got me thinking, why was David exempt from that penalty as king?
That's a good question. Because certainly there was allowance for grace and mercy even in that. Also, the person, interestingly enough, that was to bring the accusation was the jilted spouse. And where was Uriah? Yeah, he was killed. So, yeah, it's very true. He would have been guilty of that, and potentially that could have been the case. Like that instance and like this instance, those things weren't always carried out, obviously. But they could have been had it had been pushed. Yes. He was no less guilty of that sin and therefore should receive the repercussions of it. But not everybody that commits a crime gets caught and convicted. Yeah. That's a very good question, very good point.
When it came down to the sexes of the men, were more likely to get off of it. We know that from Christ's example, whenever they fought the woman to him.
Yeah, the woman caught in adultery, where was the individual that she caught? There was somebody with her. It has been assumed, and I think rightfully so, she may well have been trapped. And it may have been one of the men there that trapped her. We don't know. We don't know the details of that. It may surprise. It may be one of those things like a sting that takes place by vice cops. Nothing actually happens, but she consented to it and was beginning the act of that, but yet it was a trap, much like that. And so it's possibility of that kind of thing. We don't know. But yeah, where's the man? The man was not there in that and so it's obvious that they were not worried about justice, they were worried about trapping Jesus. And a woman at his feet crying for her life, but yet trying to push Jesus on the letter of the law was a pretty big trap. And so how does he handle that? Well, he did that rather well. Okay, anything else? All right, let's go to verse 24. We got to keep moving. And now, O sons, listen to me and be attentive. You notice it's plural here, sons. This is a message not only for the son he's talking about, but for those in general. Be attentive to the words of my mouth. Let not your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. For many a victim she is laid low. Okay, you're not the first. And she has slain our mighty throng. Her house is the way to Sheol, going down to the chambers of death. You are not the first. You're not going to be the last. And that's a dead end. Literal and pun intended. Dead end. The end of that Sheol, the place of the dead. And that's what you're getting yourself in. You're a victim, and she is bringing that about. Now, who's to blame in this? Well, both people are to blame. Him for doing what he's doing, she for blaming what she's doing. But you know what? She's going to be that way. She's going to be that way. It's up to you to stay away from that. In that particular instance. Not blaming the woman more, but this particular woman is going to be that way. She's proved that again and again. And so as a father to a son, you stay away from her. That's what's going on. Any comments, questions on chapter 7?
Just as easily could have been a man that's an adulterous man who's always...
Absolutely.
We got to remember the context there.
Yeah, it could very easily have been a man, but if it was a father writing to a daughter, it would have been certainly something like that. But yeah, and like I said before, the fact that this is an adulterous woman, kind of balances the fact that wisdom is a woman in the text. That you've got a choice, son. You either listen to wisdom or you listen to the adulteress, and so it's kind of balancing it out. And so I would not take too much out of the fact that the wisdom and adulteress are both female in that. It's just the language and how I use the language and recognizing that. Also, and the perspective as a father to a son. So telling him you are to embrace and you are to be intimate with wisdom and insight and not the adulterous woman. Okay, chapter 8. He says, and this is more about wisdom. This whole chapter is primarily about wisdom, the benefits of wisdom, the truth about wisdom, and so it's important to notice that we have all these things regarding wisdom. Starting in verse 1, does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights beside the way, at the crossroads she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town. At the inheritance of the portals she cries aloud. To you, O men, I call, and my cry is to the children of man. O simple ones, learn prudence. O fools, learn sense. Here I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. From my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. Now, last chapter, we looked at this adulterous woman that's loud and proud and shouts out to the young man as he comes by, and he listens, and he's drawn in to her temptation. Here in chapter 8, we have wisdom calling out loudly. And what does wisdom cry out? Wisdom cries out. And who does she cry out to? To the children of man, to learn prudence. To the fools, to learn sense. This young man that we talked about last chapter has competing voices calling for his attention. You know, we probably have all seen the cartoons of the little angel on one shoulder and the little devil on the other shoulder. And even though that is a oversimplification, there's some truth to that, in a way. The idea of you have a voice calling out to you that is telling you what to do in a good way. Wisdom is calling out. And here you are, a youth, and there's nothing wrong with being a youth. There's nothing wrong with being young. That's a good thing. Everybody was young at one point, if they're not now. So, what do you do? What do you listen to? It matters what you listen to. And so, you listen to wisdom. Wisdom is going to tell you what to do. Or, this seductive voice on one side is going to tell you what to do. This voice of this adulterous woman. And as Tim pointed out very well, it does not have to be just sexual sin. It can be any kind of sin. It can be any kind of temptation. The paradigm fits for any and everything. Whatever it is that you have a voice that tells you wisdom, what you should do and the way you should go about it. And then you've got a competing voice that's telling you what it wants you to do. And so the question is, which shall you listen to? Verse 8, all the words of my mouth, this is wisdom, all the words of my mouth are righteous. There is nothing twisted or crooked in them. They're all straight to him who understands, and right to those who have knowledge. Take my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. Wisdom's better than gold, silver, and jewels. Why? Because you can take gold, silver, and jewels from a fool. In fact, a fool will probably give them up quickly, spend them or whatever. But a wise person, you can't take that from them. They've got that. It's with them all their life. Verse 12, I, wisdom, dwell with prudence and find knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Pride and arrogance are the way of evil, and perverted speech I hate. I have counsel and sound wisdom. I have insight. I have strength. By me kings reign, and rulers decree what is just. By me princes rule, and nobles all who govern justly. I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold, and my yield better than choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness, in the paths of justice, granting inheritance to those who love me, and filling their treasuries. The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, and the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. Before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle in the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. When he established the foundation of the deep. When he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master workman. And I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the children of man. And now, O sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not neglect it. Blessed is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who fails to find me injures himself, and who hate me love death. We had read all of that so that we would get it. But what an awesome thing that you see that wisdom is. When did wisdom begin?
God.
with God at what point in human history?
Creation.
Before creation. Before even the earth was made. God used me to create. God was, wisdom says he is, or she is there as a workman with God. God used wisdom. For me, one of the strongest arguments of God, that God exists, is the fact that we have a designer, an intelligent designer to make everything that's there. Human scientists, with all the machines and all their understanding, under perfectly sterile circumstances, cannot create life in a petri dish. Any life. Even one life. One cell. Anything. Can't do it. And if they did, they'd brag about it all over. But they have not been able to do that. That, and then it's presupposed that that one cell created other cells that were different. Not the same, but different. You see, because the cells in your body are all different. If you take a cell from your finger, it's not the same kind of cell that's in your ear or your eyeball or your brain. Those are all, even though they all contain the same DNA, those are all vastly different cells. They are unique. A cell that is part of your fingertip is not the same cell that's your brain, or your liver, or your heart, or your lungs. All those cells are unique in the way they form and function. If you were to suggest to someone that a book, or a watch, or a pencil, or anything, this iPad that I use to read off of and use for my Bible is one of the most amazing pieces of technology ever. How did this come about?
You thought to create it.
Oh, there's a whole pile of scientists and designers and technicians, but this is not nearly as complicated as the human body, which science wants to say comes by chance. Also, one of the strongest arguments people say is that, well, look, genetically, we're like 90-some% is genetically the same as a monkey. But you know what? We're very different than a monkey. And we have four things like a monkey. We have four appendages. We've got 2 hands, 2 feet. They've got 4. But you know what? Why are things the same? Because they're the same designer, the same creator. And the reason why a human heart works, and why a baboon's heart works, and a pig's heart works, and a hummingbird's heart works, is because the system was created by the same God, and the system works. We didn't all evolve the same. We were created by the same God. And to suggest that all of this happened without a designer is to believe in the most fanciful and silly of things. If you think that all of this came about because of nothing, out of a lightning storm and a soup, then you really are believing the fairy tales. Because that is way more ridiculous than a God that created it. Because to think about all the things that would need to take place for evolution to be what it is. Besides, evolution is completely counter to all the laws of thermodynamics. Things do not evolve, they degrade. And so degradation is what naturally happens. Anyway, it is ridiculous. It takes a lot more faith to be an atheist than to be a Christian, I'll tell you that much.